Hi friends, Devang here. So welcome to another session of CA Final SCMPE revision. Today's agenda is chapter number 2. Chapter number 2, that is modern business environment. Now this chapter, the name of the chapter, if you see, well, this name of the chapter does not convey anything about the content of the chapter. Well, so what is the content of the chapter? Let me show you separately here. This chapter involves these many topics here, and these topics, let us see what are the topics here. First one is about cost of quality. Cost of quality is the only practical topic in the chapter. Yes, so cost of quality is more important for practicals, as in calculation sums you can get regarding cost of quality. Rest all the topics, most of them are mostly theory, not only theory, like theory of constraints and throughput accounting also might involve some practicals. In class, we had also done one practical regarding supply chain management. But like I said, most commonly practicals will be out of cost of quality only. Rest of the topics, I don't predict that they might have many practicals, but yeah, ultimately all topics are important for theory. All of them are important for theory. Oops. And for case study. Ultimately all topics, yes, will be important for theory as well as case studies. Yes, so let us start off with that. The first one, cost of quality. Now cost of quality is regarding what? It is regarding calculating this term called as cost of quality. Now cost of quality discusses two types of cost: cost of poor quality and cost of good quality. Cost of poor quality basically means the cost of failure. Like when a company produces poor quality products, because of the poor quality products, what damages happen to the company, that is cost of poor quality. While cost of good quality means the cost that company will incur in order to prevent or reduce the bad products. In other words, cost of poor quality is generally for bad products incurred due to bad products, while cost of good quality is to reduce the bad products or prevent the bad products. Cost of good quality is to reduce bad products. So cost of bad products, cost of poor quality involves two categories under that: internal failure cost and external failure cost. Basically, it pertains to failure. Failure means you failed to produce good quality products. You failed to produce good quality product, that is your failure. Now either you yourself identified the failure, then it is internal failure, or you could not identify the failure, you sold the products to the customer identified the failure and he returned the product. Well, that becomes external failure. So tell me, which is more harmful to the company, internal failure or external failure? Naturally, external failure is more harmful, because in case of external failure, my brand image is also being affected. Internal failure means that you produce defective goods, but before selling it to the customer, you found out the defectives and you removed them from your sales. That is called internal failure. Internal failure might not damage your brand value, but internal failure is still a cost for you, because you have spent the money, and in spite of spending the money, in spite of giving time, giving production, still you get defective units. So that is my internal failure. External failure means you have given the time, you have given the cost, you produced the goods, and you sent it to the customer found it defective and he returned it back. So in case of external failure, your production cost is waste, plus over and above that you are also losing the customer, you will lose brand value from the customer also. Yes, that is my external failure cost. While cost of good quality involves appraisal cost, prevention cost. Prevention cost is the cost incurred to prevent the defectives from happening. Prevention cost is incurred to prevent the production of defectives itself. Production ही नहीं होना चाहिए. That is prevention cost. While appraisal cost does not prevent the defectives from getting produced. Appraisal cost will simply be checking the goods. Like this checking will not prevent the defects from happening, but checking will at least prevent the checking will at least identify the defects so that you don't take it further. Yes, so appraisal cost pertains to checking cost, quality control costs and all. Prevention cost is to prevent the defects from happening. Prevention can be done by, say, giving proper training to the employees. Prevention can be done by upgrading the technology, getting better technology machines to do the production. All that would fall under prevention cost. Chalo, this was a general background about these all items of cost. Now let us see the details in there. Chalo. See here, cost of good quality is incurred in order to reduce the cost of poor quality. Naturally, if the cost of good quality you are increasing, if you incur more cost of good quality, then your cost of poor quality will decrease, because if you give more training to the employees, if you do more quality control and quality checking work, it will increase the cost of training, cost of quality control, but against that your defective cost will decrease, your failure cost will decrease. So ultimately it is all a balance. Now you will say that if for decreasing the cost of defectives I have to incur cost of good quality, then ultimately my total cost would remain same. Well, no, total cost might not remain the same. That is the one you need to strike a proper balance between these two such that the total cost is minimum. Yes, that total cost, when it comes minimum, it becomes my optimum cost of quality. If I give very high quality training to my employees and I do very severe checking of the products, yes, so in that case my training cost, checking cost will be very high. If my training cost and appraisal cost, checking cost is very high, then my defectives will be very low. And if defectives are low, meaning cost of poor quality will be low. And another situation, if my training cost, checking cost is very less, I don't give any training to my employees, I don't do any quality control checking of the products, then my training cost, checking cost will be very low. But well, in that case, my defectives cost will be high. We need to strike a balance between these two. That balanced cost becomes my optimum cost of quality. That's what we will be identifying here. Dekho. Cost of good quality is incurred in order to reduce the cost of poor quality so that overall cost of quality is minimum. Ultimate purpose is that overall cost of quality should be minimum. Yes, it is measured in terms of PAF model. PAF stands for prevention, appraisal, failure. Prevention cost, appraisal cost and failure cost. Failure can be further of two types: internal failure, external failure, like we discussed. Yeah, let's see the definitions and I'll show you examples also. These examples are necessary for you to remember. Yes, I say remember because most of the practical questions will give you such examples only. Yes, the practical questions in this topic will be such that you will be given all such items of cost in the question. You have to identify. What you have to do is just identify that which cost falls under prevention, which falls under appraisal, what will be internal and what will be external failure. You just need to identify which cost falls where. Yeah. So prevention cost, it means the cost incurred to prevent poor quality. Prevent poor quality. For example, training, you give training to the employees so that defectives are not produced at all. You do quality improvement costs so that defectives are not produced at all. Supplier evaluation, you evaluate the supplier and you identify that the supplier is sending good quality material. Look, if the supplier sends good quality material, then your finished goods will not have any defectives. If input does not have, if you stop the defects in the input itself, then output defects will reduce. Hence I say this comes under prevention cost. If you incur more of prevention cost, then your failure cost will reduce, even your appraisal cost will reduce. Like if I have given very good training to my workers so that they produce products which never have any defectives, then I don't need to spend more time in checking the products. Yes, if my training given is so nice, then I don't need to spend time in checking the products. So checking cost will decrease, appraisal cost will decrease. That's what I say. Prevention cost is incurred to prevent poor quality, and if poor quality is prevented completely, then you don't need to even do the checking and there will not be any failure. Of course, that will never happen. So I'm not saying that there will be zero checking, but I'll say that it will decrease the appraisal cost and failure cost. Post discussion prevention cost will decrease all the other cost if you incur prevention. But chalo, if you don't incur prevention costs, if you don't give any trainings or supplier evaluation or anything, then your company might produce defectives. But the defectives that are produced, instead of letting it go out, you can do some checking. Checking is my appraisal cost. Appraisal cost means cost incurred to check the quality. If you yourself check the quality, you check the quality of materials, check the quality of finished goods, check the quality of production process, all this comes under appraisal cost. So appraisal is always about checking, and more, if you incur more of the appraisal cost, if you incur more appraisal cost, then it will decrease the failure cost. If you do more intensive checking, then defects produced will be less. If you have done more intensive checking of the materials, then finished goods defects produced will be less. If you do more intense checking of the production process, then again finished goods defective produced will be less. Yes, so it will decrease the failure cost. For example, checking of incoming materials or inspection in process and final inspection. In process means during the process. Final inspection means after finished goods are produced. Yeah. Calibration means checking the settings of the machines and all. Calibration and checking of equipments, etc. All that comes under my appraisal cost. Look, I said these examples you need to remember, because in practical questions you will find the exact same examples. Third one, internal failure cost. It means the costs that are associated with defects found before the customer receives the product. Before the product is given to customer, you found the defect, meaning you yourself found the defect. So this becomes my internal failure cost. Now think, if you yourself found the defect, then the products which you finally give to the customer will not see any defects because you have found all possible defects. So the more internal failure cost you incur, that much lesser external failure cost will be incurred. Yes, so if you internally detect the defectives, then that much defects will be recognized less externally. More internal failure cost you incur, that will decrease the external failure cost. Example, process loss. Input minus normal loss is output. I give input of 100 units in the process. At the end of the process, I get output of only 80 units. So 20 units lost during the process. Did you find out that loss? Yes, you yourself found out that loss. That is my internal failure cost. Yeah. Defectives that you have produced, you found. Scrap generated or rework or rectification. Many times defectives that you produce, you will yourself rectify those defectives, repair those defectives. Then that repairing cost, rework, rectification cost also comes under internal failure cost. Downtime cost, delays in production, delays in delivery and all, that is all your internal cost. And sometimes you might also be given a contribution lost because of defects generated, because of defective units produced. So you are losing an opportunity of selling those defective units and your contribution is lost there. Yeah, you gave time producing these defective units. That same time, if you would have given another product, then it would have given you more contribution. That becomes your contribution lost. Okay. And the fourth one, internal failure cost. Internal. Okay, that's a printing mistake. I'll make the correction in the material that you get. This becomes external failure cost. Internal is already done. External failure cost, it means the cost that are associated to defects found after the customer receives the product. After the customer receives the product, customer found some defect, so he will return the product to you. So if I incur this external failure cost, that will lead to customer dissatisfaction over and above the cost that you incur for giving replacement. Yes, example, sales return or repairs and servicing. After the product is given to customer, customer complains for some product, you need to give him repairing cost. Yeah, or warranty claims, customer claims warranty replacements and all, customer complains. Plus, because of these customer complaints and all, customer will not prefer your company anymore. You will lose your brand value, you will lose the loyalty of the customer, due to which your prospective sales will be lost, and when sales will be lost, there will also be contribution lost. Yes, all these are collectively called as cost of quality. And if you notice, I just gave you some relations between all of them, that if prevention cost is incurred more, then all the remaining three will decrease. However, if appraisal cost is incurred more, then the remaining two will decrease. If internal failure, if internally you find the defectives more, then external found defectives will decrease. And if external failure cost is incurred more, then customer satisfaction will decrease. This you can use in analysis. Look for every question of cost of quality. I told you this chapter is theory plus practical both combined. So for every question of cost of quality that you answer, you need to give analysis. What analysis? Well, you write this analysis, that which cost increase will decrease which other cost. Done? Yes. All these costs are identified as compared to an ideal situation in which no defectives are produced at all and no cost of quality is incurred. So when I give you a question about cost of quality, you identify the cost of quality as compared to a situation where there is no bad quality at all. There is no production of bad quality, there is no training to be given, there is no prevention, appraisal, none of the cost is incurred. Imagine a hypothetical situation where my production process is so perfect that I incur none of these four costs. As compared to such situation, you calculate the cost of quality. Done? Yes. Okay. And for practical questions, calculate cost of quality for each option given in the question, and then choose the one option where total cost of quality is minimum, because ultimately cost of quality will include all the four items. You need to find that situation where this total is balanced so that the overall total cost is minimum. Yeah. Also, you need to mention in the analysis. Don't forget, analysis has to be written in every question, especially in these questions. You need to mention in the analysis that long-term reputation of the brand is also important. Like for example, what if your practical question had two situations? Situation 1 said that don't incur any training cost, no prevention, no appraisal cost. If the defectives are produced, let it be produced. Calculate the cost of those failure. That is situation 1. Situation 2 says that you incur training cost, appraisal cost, so that the failure cost will reduce. Now out of these two situations, as per the calculation, you will choose the one which has total cost less. What if situation 1 has lesser total cost? So as per the calculation, you will say that situation 1 is best. You should not incur training cost and appraisal cost, because training is very expensive. Rather, the cost of defectives, cost of failure is not that much more. It is okay, you incur the cost of failure as it is. But this is my comment as per the calculation. But non-financial factors, you also comment regarding non-financial factors like a long-term reputation. Right now it seems that training is very expensive. It is rather good enough to incur the cost of defectives. But you can also say that in the long run, if defectives keep continuing like this, then in the long run, customers might find my company not very valuable. I will lose customers in the long run, due to which my long run profits will decrease. My brand value will deteriorate. Possible? Yes, possible. So ultimately, it is always good to incur the prevention and appraisal cost. Even though prevention and appraisal cost is expensive, still in the long run, it is always advisable to incur the prevention and appraisal cost, so that long run, long term brand value of the company is not getting damaged. That is my last line. That is what you comment in your answers. That long term reputation of the brand is also important to consider, which is not considered by cost of quality. Done? Yes. Okay, that was regarding cost of quality. Next is full theory, total quality management, TQM. Now the practical questions under TQM will look similar to the practical questions under cost of quality. In class we already did some questions about TQM also, but the practical questions under TQM has the same kind of calculation like we did in cost of quality. Yes, you can refer our classwork practicals for that, because it is almost the same kind of questions. I've given you some basic summary. Now you can see the classwork practical questions for that. But theory part, now let us revise. Total quality management. What is that? It aims at improving the quality of organization's output through continuous improvement of internal practices. Yes, so TQM involves continuous improvement, total quality management. The prime focus here is not to generate profits. The main focus here is to keep improving the quality of my products. I want to manufacture the products which are even better and better in quality. That is my total quality management. In fact, the same thing you have also learnt under the topic of Kaizen, chapter 3. It is almost related. I can say it is almost the same thing. Yes, the word Kaizen is the term from which TQM had originated. But anyways, Kaizen, we have done in chapter 3. We'll revise that in chapter 3. This requires ensuring that things are done right the first time itself, and that the defects and waste are eliminated from operations. Purpose is that first time when you do something, that first time itself the thing should be done correctly. Because the first time the things are not done correctly, then it will generate defects. But TQM means that defects should be made decreased. Defects should be produced lesser and lesser. Yeah. So the purpose is that things are done right the first time itself and the defects are eliminated. Practical questions of TQM will involve same kind of calculations as cost of quality. And the basic theory in TQM involves the following topics. Chalo, for the time being, let me also revise the practical questions in both the cases. Say for cost of quality and for TQM, one common kind of practical question is this. Question 1 from your practicals that we had done. I'll just remind you what we had in this question. They'll generally give you two situations. Situation 1 is when they do not incur any prevention and appraisal cost. So you will be given all types of failure cost there. Situation 2, you will be given some prevention appraisal cost, and because of that prevention and appraisal cost, the failure cost will decrease. Like in this question, you notice in this question 1, say this red mark here is situation 1, no prevention appraisal you are doing, and the blue markings here is your situation 2 where prevention appraisal cost is incurred. So if no prevention cost is incurred, then 10% of direct materials was being scrapped, 20% of the items produced was discovered to be defectives, and 12.5% of the items delivered to the customer turned out to be defectives. So look, if materials were scrapped, did the customer scrap materials or you scrap the materials? Naturally, you scrap the materials. Material does not go to customer. Material you only scrapped out because it turned out to be defective. That becomes my internal failure cost. Then 20% of your production turns out to be defective. Who found them defective? You found them defectives because it is before delivered to customer. That also becomes internal failure cost. And 12.5% of the ones delivered to the customer were defectives. Delivered to the customer, they turned out defectives and they were rejected by the customer. Well, that becomes my external failure cost. Would you understand that? Yes. And after prevention appraisal, After you spend 4,50,000 on training cost and another 50,000 on quality control, then after incurring those two expenses, then these percentages decreased to this percentages. So like you see, again, two situations you have here. You identify total cost of quality of both situations. Choose the one which has total cost of quality the least. Done? Yes. Acha. Also, the style of calculations that I had explained you in this question 1 was that you are given demand of the customer is 28,000. So ultimately 28,000 units demand you have to satisfy. Now to satisfy that 28,000 units demand, will you produce exact 28,000 only? No, because you see there are defects external as well as internal involved here. Hence we did some calculation for making use of these percentages. Let me show you for these three. 10% of the materials were scrapped. So I assume materials as 100 minus 10% will be scrapped. Remaining materials I put into the machine. Machine will give me output. Output, out of that output also 20% of the output, 20% of the items produced turned out to be defective. Remove that also. Then what remains is the one that I give to customer. The ones which I delivered to customer also, from that 12.5% turned out to be rejected. That calculation I had shown you here. If my material originally purchased was 100, then 10% of that material was scrapped. So balance 90 turns out to be the material input, and if 90 was input, all 90 becomes the output. Out of 90 output, now they say 20% was faulty output. Faulty, so naturally that will not be given to the customer. What I gave to customer was 72. So good output delivered to the customer turned out to be 72. If the good output delivered to customer was 72, then out of that 72 what was delivered to the customer, there was still further rejection. 12.5% was rejection out of that. So 9 was rejection out of that. Balance 63 is the demand of the customer which got finally satisfied. So finally customer demand is satisfied will be only 63. Question says that you have to satisfy 28,000 units demand of the customer. Well, if you have to satisfy 28,000 units demand of the customer, then take this 63 is 28,000 and go reverse find all the others. Yes. Now, for the materials that was scrapped 4444, for that material cost becomes your waste. Material cost becomes your cost of quality. For the defective output here 8,000 units, your entire production cost has got wasted. And for 4,000 rejected units, your production cost as well as delivery cost in that has got wasted. Yes, that is how you identify your wastage cost, cost of quality. Done. Same thing you do again for the proposed situation then. Yes, and in fact, again that same thing we had done in the question of TQM also. Clear? Yes. Okay. Back to the revision. TQM. Well, other topics are now theory of TQM. We'll just brush them up fast. Regarding TQM, my first theory is 6 C's of TQM. 6 C's, these are basically things that are required in order to achieve total quality management. You require commitment of the top management. There should be a culture and attitude change of the people. Like all your employees in the company should have an attitude of focusing on quality rather than focusing on the profitability. Yeah, so your attitude and culture should be to make quality as a normal part of everyone's job. Continuous improvement. TQM does not mean one time you make improvement and then forget it. No, it has to be continuous improvement. After you have done improvement, don't stop, keep doing even more improvement. After you decreased the defectives, you are happy defectives have decreased. No, don't be happy. You still keep striving to decrease the defectives still further down. Hence I say it is continuous improvement. Cooperation of employees are needed. Yes. Customer focus. Ultimately the focus is to have better customer satisfaction. Yes, customer will be more satisfied if I deliver to him 0 defects. Yeah. And control. To monitor improvements and correct deficiencies. Control basically means compare budgets with the actuals. Compare your estimated defectives with the actual defectives and try to decrease the differences. Yeah, these are called as 6 C's of TQM. Then you have Deming's 14-point methodology, which in my opinion is Ghatia topic. Read that from the book. I'm not revising that. I'm just showing you what all topics are there in the chapter. Then there is PDCA cycle. PDCA stands for Plan, Do, Check, Act. It describes activities a company needs to perform. So for TQM, what activities a company should do? Well, for TQM, activities that the company needs to perform are these. Describes the activities that a company needs to perform in order to incorporate a continuous improvement in its operations, in order to implement TQM. This cycle is also known as the Deming wheel. And the circular nature of the cycle shows that it is a continuous process. You plan for quality improvement, do the things that you planned, check whether your plan is working or not, and if it is not working, take corrective actions and do the plan again. Keep going. This becomes my PDCA cycle. Done? Yeah. This was the important theories under TQM. Third topic in the chapter was business excellence model. Now, this topic, the theory given in your book, I had told you, is not sufficient. Instead, more theory I had given you for this topic in one of the case studies. Yeah, I have made summary notes over here, not just out of your theory book. I've also identified points in my summary out of the case studies that we have learned. Yeah, the case study which we did about business excellence model was as such only a theory based case study. What was written in the answer of the case study was also mostly theory of the topic. We'll revise that over here. Dekho. Business excellence basically indicates to excel in your business. Now, when will you say that you have excelled in the business? Well, you have excelled in the business when all the stakeholders of your business are happy. The purpose here is to create value for the stakeholders. Create value for the stakeholders and sustain that value. Not like one time you make your stakeholders happy and then it's done. No, you have to continuously keep them happy and you have to sustain that happiness. That is my business excellence model. Yeah, we'll read. It is a philosophy for developing and strengthening the management systems and processes of an organization to improve performance and create value for stakeholders. To improve performance and create value for stakeholders. Now, what does that creating value mean? Creating value for the stakeholder means fulfilling what the stakeholder needs. What the shareholder needs, profit. What the customer needs, good products. What the employees need, good working conditions. All these are the stakeholders. Provide them what they need. That is my business excellence. Yeah. Stakeholders will include what? Will include customers who want good product, shareholders who want good profit, employees who want good salary, good pay, good working conditions, society who want good social service from the company and all these are the stakeholders. Company should achieve excellence in all aspects of its operations, not just achieve excellence, but it should also be able to sustain that excellence. You know, mostly companies focus only on profit. That is not business excellence. Business excellence would say that you should achieve excellence in all areas, not just satisfying the shareholders. You should also satisfy the customers, society at large, and in general, many such stakeholders. Yes. Okay. Now, as per your book, they have just given names of 5 different business excellence models. These are the 5 models: EFQM model, Singapore BE model, Japan Quality Award Model, Baldrige Criteria for Performance Excellence, and Australian Business Excellence Framework. Out of these 5 models, only one model we describe in detail, that is EFQM model. What is EFQM? Well, EFQM is European Foundation for Quality Management. Full form. This full form not given in your theory, you'll find it in the case study. All the details that I am giving you here, I am giving you these details from the case number 3 out of the case studies which we did in a class. Yes, so you can refer that case 3 because as I said, case 3 was less important as a case, rather that case is more important as a direct theory. So it is a direct theory case that you were given. So EFQM excellence model was developed by European Foundation for Quality Management, some institute. It can help the company understand cause and effect relationships. The main focus of this model is to identify cause and effect relationships. Cause and effect relationship between what the organization does and the result it achieves. It has 3 components. First component says fundamental concept of excellence, meaning first you need to define that in my company what do I consider as excellence. For me, what achieving what will be called as excellence. Like for example, if I am a chartered accountant faculty, chartered accountant teaching is my profession. If I am into teaching profession, then excellence for me is not that I earn lakhs and lakhs of profits. Excellence for me is not that I purchase Mercedes Benz and all. Excellence for me is that more number of students appreciate me, respect me. So what defines excellence for you? That is the first topic here, fundamental concept of excellence. It means to identify that what defines excellence for the company. In which area does the company wish to have excellence? Well, examples. Fundamental concepts of excellence. What areas, what could be the areas where we want excellence? Well, areas could be adding value for the customer, meaning I want to achieve excellence from the viewpoint of customer needs I want to fulfill. I should be excelling in fulfilling customer needs, or I can have excellence in creating sustainable future, meaning fulfilling the society needs. Sustainable future generally means fulfilling society and environment needs. Developing organizational capability means I want to identify that what is the capability, what is the company capable of being great at, so that it can differentiate itself from the competitors. Like I need to identify that I am capable of being great at what. If I start teaching auditing subject, then I will suffer, students will also suffer, because frankly I am very bad in auditing subject. Yeah, so I need to identify that in what areas am I capable of being great at. I know that I am capable of being greatest teacher for costing subject. I know that I am capable of being greatest teacher for costing subject. So I need to identify that what areas am I capable of being great at, so that I can differentiate myself from the competitors. Yes. Fourth, harnessing creativity and innovation. Promote a working environment that encourages creativity and innovation. You promote your employees and everyone to be more creative, more innovative. That can also be my target. Leading with vision, inspiration, integrity. Leading means basically motivating your employees and all, so that they are more motivated. Tone at the top defines the rest of the company. Tone at the top, meaning how the top management approaches excellence. Based on that, employees will approach excellence. I'll give you one example. One clear example, what recently I have noticed, Indian government of India, they started promoting few years back, they started promoting that Swachh Bharat campaign and all, and they forcefully said that you should have dry waste, wet waste segregated separately. Okay, good. We started doing that in our society. Yes, we actually started doing that. Dry waste, wet waste, used to keep it segregated. Every single household in our society used to segregate it. Even the society compound where all the waste is brought together, they also kept it separately, dry waste and wet waste. But when the municipal corporation van will come to collect the waste, they collected dry waste, wet waste both together in the same dump. Now if they are collecting it all together, then we will not be encouraged to keep it separately. Do you understand that? So if the tone at the top, if the top management itself is not very much keen on excellence, then employees will never be keen on excellence. If the top management authorities are itself not very keen on achieving excellence, then employees will definitely not be keen on achieving excellence. That is my point here. So Tone at the top defines the rest of the company. So top management should be having a proper attitude towards excellence. Managing with agility. Agility basically means your capability to respond when something goes wrong. So capable to identify and respond to opportunities and threats. The company should be capable to identify and respond whenever there is some opportunity or threat. Like when the coronavirus COVID-19 situation had taken severe turn in India, then many businesses stopped. Many businesses had very few customers and all. Now I know one person near my house. He's a tailor. He has a tailoring shop and mostly specializes in wedding garments and all. Now, naturally, during this time, who is going to get married? Even if people are getting married as per the government regulations, social distancing norms and all, so people will not be calling so many guests in there. So it will be a low profile wedding. And maybe because of that, this tailor had lost majority of the business. He had lost majority of the business. People were not stitching garments or anything. So this guy started stitching creative masks. Yes, he started stitching all the types of creative masks, and throughout all these months of lockdown and the coronavirus situation, since last 4 or 5 months, he has been earning his daily money mostly out of selling those masks. So that is the ability to identify and respond to opportunities and threats. Yeah, succeed through the talent of the people. Better the people in the organization, better is the organization naturally. So you need to have an atmosphere of teamwork so that employees are more motivated, and better the employees, better will be the company. All these are required for excellence. Look, all these points are the things that are required for excellence in a company. And finally, what is also needed here is sustaining that good results. Because look, getting excellence is not a one-time exercise. It is required to sustain this excellence for a long term. These 8 points you have to memorize. These 8 points, I would say, are my fundamental concepts of excellence. Done? Yes. In fact, there's a way to remember that. Dekho, customers, society. So ultimately, I need you to remember them in this sequence only. Adding value to the customer, keeping customer happy, keeping the society happy. For doing that, you need to check that in order to do this, does the company have enough capability or not? Yes. And employees should be motivated for that. Employees should be more creative and innovative for that. In order to make the employees more creative, you have to be a very good leader. You need to lead with vision and all. Plus, whenever there are any challenges or opportunities and threats, you should be able to face that opportunities in a better way. Succeeding through talent of the people. And finally, yes, sustaining outstanding results. Whatever these results you achieved, it should be sustained over a long period of time. Done? Yes, that summarizes fundamental concepts of excellence. Next part in my business, in my EFQM excellence model. Look, I said EFQM model has 3 components. Number 1 is fundamental concepts of excellence. Number 2 is criteria, which will involve results and enablers. And number 3 is something called as radar. So second component, criteria. Criteria has 2 discussions, enablers and results. Enabler covers what the organization does and how it does it. Enabler is the list of things that the organization should do and how it should do, while result is what the organization achieves for each stakeholder. Each stakeholder like customer, people matlab employees, society, and business matlab shareholder, profits. So ultimately the company should achieve excellence towards all the 4 stakeholders. Company should achieve excellence for customer, people, society, and the business profits, that is shareholders. But in order to achieve these results, what should the organization do and how should it do? What should they do? That is called as enablers. Remember, I said it is about cause and effect relationship. Enablers are the cause and effect means the result. Results are the 4 results over here. So enablers covers what the organization should do and how it should do it. Well, they should have good leadership. Leadership must take correct decisions at the correct time. They should have a good strategy which will help them achieve their results. So they should have good strategy. Operations must be planned and implemented as per the strategy to achieve the organizational goals. ठीक है? People must be motivated enough and well managed with a work culture that opens opportunities for personal development also. So people should be motivated, well managed, and they should have opportunities for personal development also. Partnerships and resources. Look, company alone might not be able to have more excellence unless they have good partners. Good partners means good suppliers, good say service agencies and all, good software distributors and all that is needed. So partners and resources with other organizations, vendors, service providers, etc., they should have good partnerships with them. And processes, products and services, these are the routine operations. Routine operations, processes, products and services should be managed and continuously improved. If these 5 things you do, then these 4 results might be achieved. If these 5 things you do, then the 4 results might be achieved. I hope you understand the relation between enablers and results. What results do you wish to achieve? Well, you wish to achieve customer results, that is, customers should be satisfied, loyal and increasing. You check whether customers are loyal, customers are satisfied, customers are increasing or not. People results you check, meaning check whether employees are skilled, motivated, having lesser employee turnover, whether the company has access to higher required talent or not. All that comes under people results. Society results means check whether the company's CSR activities, corporate social responsibility objectives, are being met or not. And business results means check whether you are generating good profits or not. Yeah, all these things you check, that comes under results. Notice enablers, those 5 enablers will help you achieve the results. That is the relation between enablers and results. Done. And the third component under business excellence model is called radar, which is an acronym for result, approaches, deploy, assess and refine. So first you identify what result is required. According to the result required, you decide the approaches, how will you approach. You plan and develop the approaches, then you deploy the approaches. Whatever plans you made, you implement the plan. After implementation, you assess. Assess matlab check that whether the plan is working or not. If working, good. If not working, refine the plan and go again. That is a circular route. This signifies your entire EFQM model. This is called as radar. It is a tool for analyzing the performance. Trust me, this topic will have only theory significance. If you are given any case study about this topic, as such, there is nothing special to be written in any case study. If you have a case study about this topic, all you have to write is this theory itself. Yes, I have summarized this theory of almost 5-6 pages into this one single pager. This turns out to be the most important page for EFQM model. Done. Okay. Further, next is the topic for theory of constraints. Now, well, this topic and the next topic we will discuss together, theory of constraints and throughput accounting. Ultimately, in this topic, practical questions, if it comes, if at all it comes, it will be similar to what we did in decision making. Because look, in one sense, the word constrain means something that is restricting your production, something that restricts your production. So basically that word constrain is just like key factor. Remember decision making chapter. In fact, I can also say that the word constrain is just like bottleneck. You remember what is bottleneck? Let me remind you with one example. Let us revise bottleneck with one example. Say my company produces a particular product, but this one product requires passing through 3 departments. The final product appears after passing through all 3 departments: department 1, department 2, and department 3. However, the maximum output capacity of department 1 has maximum output capacity of say 1000 units. Maximum output capacity of department 1 is 1000 units. Department 2 maximum output capacity is say 800 units, and department 3 maximum output capacity is say 1200 units. So ultimately, if my product requires all 3 departments, so maximum overall, how many finished goods can I produce? Well, maximum finished goods that I can produce I produce 1200? No, because D3 has 1200 capacity, D2 has only 800 units capacity. So unless D2 will give units to D3, D3 cannot produce. Maximum how many units D2 can give? Maximum D2 can give only 800 units to D3, so final production will be only 800. Can I have 1000 production? Well, you can do 1000 production in D1, but even after that, out of that 1000, only 800 can be processed by D2. Remaining 200 will remain unused. Final product comes after D3. Your raw material is given in D1. Output of D1 goes to D2, output of D2 goes to D3, and output of D3 becomes the finished goods. Maximum how much finished goods can I produce? Well, maximum finished goods that can be produced will be whichever is lowest out of the 3, 800. That 800 is called as my bottleneck production. I also told you an example that why is it called as a bottleneck. Imagine a bottle. Imagine a bottle like this, but the neck of the bottle is always narrow. So when you pour the contents of the bottle, when you pour the content out from the bottle, no matter the bottle size is very large, even if the bottle size is very large, still how much content comes out depends on the size of the neck. The neck of the bottle is restricting how much output can I get from the bottle. Same way, out of the 3 departments D1, D2, D3 here, department D2 is the bottleneck. D2 is restricting my final production because D2 does not have capacity, so other 2 departments will have to sit idle. Because D2 does not have more capacity, so other 2 departments will be sitting idle. Final production possible will be only 800 units here. If my final production is only 800, meaning department 1 will not produce 1000, it will produce only 800. Give that 800 to D2, D2 will make that 800 further, and that 800 are given to D3. So D3 will also process only 800. D1, D3 will have spare capacity, D2 will be operating at full capacity. Done? Yes, that production is called as bottleneck production, and that department D2 here will be called as my bottleneck department. Done? So see that here. This is my theory of constraints. In fact, I had explained you the concept of bottleneck first time in our chapter number 11 in the budgets chapter itself, because it had an impact in budgets chapter also, it has impact in other chapters also. So we'll go on here. Ultimately, that concept of bottleneck comes from this theory. The theory of constraints focuses on revenue and cost management when faced with bottleneck. What is bottleneck? Bottleneck resource means the one due to which overall production is getting restricted. That one resource, one department, because of which overall production is restricted. Now, theory of constraints suggests that bottleneck resource should be fully utilized, while non-bottleneck resource should not be utilized to 100%. Will you see that here? That if I produce 800 units, then bottleneck resource D2 is fully utilized, but D1, D3 will be utilized less than 100% naturally. In fact, now in this company, if I wish to increase capacity, for increasing capacity, I might have to do some extra investment. I need to buy a new machine. Tell me, will I buy new machine in D1 or D3? No, because these two departments already have spare capacity. If you want to increase overall production, you buy new machine in the bottleneck department. If you want to increase overall production, you need to increase production of the bottleneck department first. That is my theory. Theory of constraint suggests that bottleneck resource should be fully utilized, while non-bottleneck resource should not be utilized to 100% of their capacity, since it would result in inventory buildup before the bottleneck resource. You saw that here, that if D1 will produce 1000, then can you further process 1000? No, further process you can do is only 800. 200 will be lying unused inventory buildup. Yes. It will lead to inventory buildup before the bottleneck resource. Theory of constraint involves three measures. These are three words you need to know for this theory. Throughput is another name for contribution, which is sales minus unit level variable cost. Look, there might be variable costs which are batch level also. Don't consider them here. Which variable cost will I take here? Only unit level. Unit level means the ones which change with the number of units. So sales minus unit level variable cost, and in this theory, only for this theory, generally direct labor is considered as fixed cost, hence it is not included in variable expenses. Now you will say that, sir, during our class we have always taken direct labor as variable. Yes, by default direct labor you always take variable. In fact, in all the practical questions you can take direct labor as variable. Only for this topic theory of constraints, it is specifically defined here that under this topic of theory of constraints, direct labor is not considered as a variable cost. Direct labor will be taken in operating expenses, meaning fixed cost. It includes direct labor and all other operating and maintenance expenses. So throughput means contribution, but that is sales minus variable cost other than direct labor. Investment means the assets that are required to convert materials into contribution, and operating expenses are the other expenses like fixed cost. These three terms are the terms pertaining to theory of constraints. So whenever you find a question of TOC, if the question specifically mentions that it is to be solved by theory of constraints, then in such question, when you calculate contribution, do not consider direct labor. In fact, if the question is about theory of constraints, then in most of the cases, the wordings of the question will not even give you direct labor. They will not generally give you direct labor in the question, so you don't have any confusion. If direct labor is given and they have said that you solve by TOC method, then consider direct labor as fixed cost. Done? Yes, the objective of this entire theory, the objectives of management are to increase the throughput, increase the contribution by minimizing investment and decreasing operating expenses. You want to increase your throughput, meaning increase contribution, and you want to have as less investment as possible, as less operating expense, as less fixed cost as possible. That is my purpose here. Okay, for practical questions, notice for practical questions how to identify bottleneck. Well, you calculate or identify bottleneck just like what I explained you in this example here. This entire example also I have summarized in my summary here. And how to identify bottleneck? Well, you calculate a maximum production of each department or a resource like this. Maximum output of D1, D2, D3. Find maximum production of each department. Then step 2, bottleneck production means whichever is lowest. So you identify maximum production of each department, and then bottleneck production is out of these three whichever is lowest. 800 was the lowest, So out of all the department wise maximum, whichever is lowest becomes your bottleneck production. This bottleneck production indicates maximum overall production. And now if overall production needs to be increased, will it help by increasing capacity in D1, D3? No. If overall production has to be increased, if you wish to increase the overall production, then bottleneck capacity must be increased first. Whatever is bottleneck, that you have to release first, then only extra production can happen. Done? Yes. Okay, that was regarding theory of constraints. Throughput accounting is a kind of continuation of the same. So even in throughput accounting, the word throughput means contribution. Even over here, labor and overhead costs are considered as fixed. Only materials is taken as variable cost. It believes that accounting should monitor the rate at which business makes money. Now, rate at which your business makes money is basically nothing but contribution. So, rate at which business makes money means contribution. But in this theory, it is called as throughput. Contribution means throughput over here. Thus, it focuses on return per product per bottleneck hour. Return is like profit. Profit per product per hour is what you will identify over here. Well, profit per product per hour is like, it is just like contribution per hour. Contribution per hour. Remember chapter 6 key factor mein, this is exactly what we did. Yeah. So you identify return per product per bottleneck hour, that purpose, that is called as throughput accounting. Yeah. It treats only direct materials as variable, other labor and other overheads are considered as fixed. Well, this also involves throughput accounting ratio. Formula hai, practical topic, just remember the ratio. Throughput accounting ratio is throughput per minute. Now throughput per minute is like contribution per minute. Instead of contribution per hour, this focuses on contribution per minute. Divide by factory cost per minute. Now what does this indicate? This indicates that out of my factory cost, how much was contributed by this product? Out of my total factory cost, how much was contributed per minute by this product? Out of the per minute factory cost, how much is contributed by the product? If this ratio is greater than 1, meaning product is profitable. Why? Because if all capacity were devoted to that product, then throughput generated would exceed the total factory cost. If my all capacity was dedicated to this one product only, then my total contribution will exceed the total factory cost. Yes, because total factory cost I have divided, throughput I have taken in numerator, contribution divided by factory cost it is. If it is more than 1, meaning a contribution is more. If it is less than 1, means contribution is less. Done? Yes. Okay, that is throughput accounting and throughput accounting ratio. Next in your chapter is a pretty long theory about supply chain management. But then when I say supply chain management, what does it include? Well, remember when I say supply chain management, it involves all the entities since I get my raw materials until I give finished goods to my customers. Imagine I get raw material from my supplier, it is delivered to my factory. In my factory, production is done. After production, it is dispatched to the warehouse. From the warehouse, it is then later delivered to the customer. Well, all the activities involved in all these places, all of them comes under supply chain management. Read here. It involves all activities starting from getting materials from the vendor, producing finished goods out of those materials, storage of the finished goods in warehouse, and distribution centers that deliver to the retailers. sorry, distribution centers that deliver to the retailers, and finally selling the product to ultimate customer. All these activities involved together creates my supply chain management. Yeah, purpose is to give customers what they want, when and where they want, at the price at which they want. Yes, for that we need to analyze the value chain. Look, all the theory which I describe in supply chain management, I would recommend all these theory you write in your answers if they ask you this in case study. If they ask you any case study pertaining to supply chain management, your answer should include all this theory which I say. And notice I've also related chapter 1 over here. Porter's value chain analysis. Value chain model, value chain analysis, which says that you identify the activities which are adding value to the customer. That adding value to customer is basically part of supply chain management. We need to analyze the value chain, analyze that which activities are adding value, which activities are non-value added, try to eliminate the non-value added activities. Yes, this all process becomes my supply chain management. Done? Yes. Okay. Okay, now under supply chain there are two types given in your book: push model and pull model. Push model says that your production is done by yourself. Push model says that production is done whatever company wants to produce. So production is done based on the basis of anticipated demand, and then these goods are then pushed to the customers. In other words, I will tell the customers that you buy what I produce. I will tell the customers that you buy what I produce. That is called as a push model. While pull model means that I will identify what the customer wants and accordingly I do the production. It is like order based industry. Order based industry where I will produce only based on what the customer is demanding. Yeah. So pull model, in case of pull model, stocks are produced in response to actual demand, not based on anticipated demand. So this was my first difference here. Push model is based on anticipated demand. Pull model is based on actual demand, meaning whatever is demand of the customer, that demand will pull the production. I will produce what you want, not that I will sell you what I want. Push model means that I will do the production and I will push the goods to you that no, you buy this only, yahi lena hai aapko. While pull model means that I will identify what the customer actually wants and accordingly I do the production. I will produce only as many number of units that the customers have actually demanded. Yeah, that is called as pull model. It is based on actual demand where demand pulls the production. This approach focuses on selling what the customer really wants rather than selling what we have. Rather than selling what I have available, no, I will sell what the customer really wants. This is called as pull model. So in general, as a general understanding, I would say that pull model is better than the push model. So if you find this in any case study, you can comment that. You can comment this in any case study that if you find in the case study that company is following push model, due to push model they will have problems like excess inventory being produced or products getting outdated, obsolete and all, because customers are not buying. So you can suggest the company that instead of push model you can switch over to pull model, in which you will not just do production because you have the capacity. No, you will do production only after you receive orders from the customer. Only based on actual demand you do production. Let the capacity remain underutilized. Even if the capacity remains unutilized, it is okay. It is still better than having excess inventory, better than having your products get obsolete and outdated. Done. That can be your recommendation, suggestion in certain case studies. Yeah, so I'll just write that here. According to this theory, I would say that pull model is better than the push model. Yeah, so if you find that in any case study, accordingly you write your answer. Okay, next There are two components under supply chain management: upstream supply chain management, and then you'll have downstream supply chain management. Upstream pertains to my transactions with the supplier. Downstream means my transactions with my customer. I told you supply chain management covers everything since I get materials from my vendor until the final goods are sold to the customers. Yes, so when I get materials from my vendor, that comes under upstream supply chain management. Well, under that, some theory topics. First one, it says about the factors to consider while choosing a supplier. What factors should I consider while choosing a supplier? Well, I should consider bargaining power. Bargaining power of my company, buying organization, depends on whether the supplier's business is larger or smaller. If the supplying company is a huge, big company, then I will not have good bargaining power. But if the supplying company is a very small business, newly started, then I will have better bargaining power. Also, what matters while choosing a supplier is whether I want bulk discount. If I want bulk discount, then I should purchase everything from a single supplier so that my order is a bulk order. But in that case, there is risk of not getting the delivery on time. Maybe if this one single supplier is not able to deliver, then my production will get stuck up, will get halted. So to avoid that risk of failed deliveries, multiple suppliers are also advisable. You need to think what is more important for you. Is getting if getting bulk discount is more important for you, then you keep single supplier. But if having lesser risk of delivery, having more surety of delivery is important for you, then you have multiple suppliers in your network. Yeah. Also, while choosing supplier, it is necessary to consider cost, quality, and speed of delivery. It's also necessary to consider make or buy or outsourcing decision. Rather than buying the material, maybe it is more convenient to make the material yourself, or maybe it is more convenient to outsource material making to someone. Yeah, so make or buy and outsourcing also you need to consider while choosing a supplier. Also, they say that you can use information technology for getting materials from the supplier, which can involve e-sourcing, e-purchasing, e-payments. E-sourcing means selecting the supplier electronically. You invite tenders from the supplier electronically. They will submit their quotations electronically and you will choose which is the best supplier electronically. E-purchasing involves making purchase orders automatically through an extranet to the supplier. My software is connected to the supplier software so that when my material stock goes below the reorder level, then my software will automatically generate a purchase order to the supplier software. Yes, so e-purchasing is about automated purchase orders, and e-payment means payment through the internet, faster payment like internet banking transfers or Google Pay, UPI transfers, and all that will fall under e-payment. Simple topic, not much descriptions there. And downstream supply chain management, downstream refers to transactions with the customer. All my transactions with my customers. Well, under that, the first topic is relationship marketing. Relationship marketing, it's talking about keeping existing customers and to attract new customers. To keep existing customers and attract new customers. Well, it also talks about 6 types of market. Look, I told you this entire topic is full theory now. It is just a theory revision. 6 types of markets that you have: internal market, referral market, influence market, recruitments market, suppliers market, and customers market. Well, internal markets means my employees will be buying my products. I need to satisfy them. Referral markets means my existing customers will refer my products to others. So I need to satisfy those references also. Influence market, maybe some person who is an influential person, he buys my product, so many others will also buy my product. Like say some big celebrity or very famous person influences other customers to buy my product, then that influential person is my influence market. Recruitments market is the market where I get employees. Suppliers market is the market where I get my suppliers. Customers market is the market where I get my customers. Done? Yes. Okay. Now within downstream SCM, I would say these two are important topics. Customer account profitability. CAP? Well, it is talking about analyzing profitability customer wise. If you remember, we have done that in chapter 10 also. Chapter 10, we had one topic where you identify profits customer wise. Using activity based costing, you identify that how much profit did I get from which customer. Well, almost the same thing is said over here. It says that you calculate and analyze customer wise profitability. You calculate and analyze customer wise profitability, and it is a 5-step process. Step 1, analyze the customer base and split those customers into segments. Split customers into segments, meaning you identify which customers are platinum customers, gold customer, iron and lead customers. Platinum customers are the ones which are most profitable, then gold customers little less profitable, iron and lead customers least profitable. Yes, why to do that segments? Remember Pareto analysis chapter 4, so that this will help you to focus more on the platinum and gold customers, so that you can ignore iron and lead customers. So classify the customers into segments, then calculate revenues earned from each of those customers annually. What revenues am I earning from them? Calculate annual costs of serving those segment, like what is the total revenue from platinum customers, what is the total cost incurred towards platinum customers. Yes, identify and retain quality customers. And step 5, re-engineer or eliminate unprofitable customers. Unprofitable means those customers in which the revenue is very less, but the cost of serving that customer is very high. If revenue you are getting from that customer is less, cost of that customer is more, then might as well eliminate those customers. Eliminate unprofitable segments. This is my customer account profitability. And similar to that, customer lifetime value. Well, why is it necessary to analyze the customer lifetime value? Because look, if I find one customer who is a platinum customer, very profitable, well, if this customer is very profitable, maybe he is very profitable because of one single transaction, one time transaction. However, I know that this customer is an NRI. He is not going to come back to India ever again. He was just on a tourist visit in India and he bought my product. I found him very profitable. But just for this one-time purchase from NRI, will I ignore my regular customer? No. Regular customers are always having more lifetime value. Just because this customer is more profitable in this transaction does not mean you focus on that customer only, because there might be other customers who are not so profitable in each transaction, but those customers are your loyal customers. They are lifelong customers. Hence, you should also calculate customer lifetime value. Lifetime value here is basically the net present value of the future cash flows from lifetime of customer relationships. It is the present value of all the profits that I am going to get from this customer over the entire lifetime. It is the present value of all the future cash flows from lifetime with the lifetime relation with this customer. Yeah, in this case, profits are identified by activity based costing. Naturally, it is the best way to identify customer wise profit, and it depends on the judgment made regarding duration of relationships. Look, I can never know that this customer will be purchasing products from me for how many years. It is purely a judgment. It is based on a judgment made regarding how long will this customer stay with me. Yes, that is my customer lifetime value. We had done one practical question about this also in class. I'll not be revising that. Simple question it was. You just had to take all the cash flows from the customer and convert them into present value. I hope you know how to convert present value. Done? Yes. Okay. And the last two topics then is gain sharing arrangements, outsourcing. Gain sharing in the most recent RTP, May 2020 RTP, they have given almost 2 questions regarding a gain sharing. So I might say that for the July 20 exams if they are conducted, or then otherwise for November 20 exams, I would say that gain sharing arrangements might be an important topic. Yeah. So what is gain sharing arrangements? It is an arrangement where I will have an arrangement with my supplier. Now when I say supplier, does not necessarily mean raw material supplier. He might also be a service supplier. He supplies some service to me. But this supplier does not expect any payment from me. He will give me that goods or services free of cost. Instead, he will ask me to share the gain with him. So for example, I used to manufacture a material myself. Just example, imagine this. I'm manufacturing my own material at a cost of say 100 per kg. I find a supplier who is ready to deliver that material to me at 80 per kg. So because of the supplier, I am saving 20 rupees. That 20 rupees is the benefit which I got because of the supplier. Supplier will not take any direct payment from me. Rather, he will take a share of the total savings. Yes, so because of the supplier, because of that outsourcing, overall savings is say 20 rupees. That savings will be shared with the supplier. That is called as gain sharing arrangement. Yes, if the supplier gives me some services because of which my sales increases, because of which my customers increases, I have some benefit. That benefit is now shared with the supplier. Sharing ratio has been decided. That is called as gain sharing arrangement. Now, when you write answers about this, there are certain particular keywords which should definitely come in your answer. What are the keywords? Dekho. Gain sharing arrangement is an arrangement where supplier agrees to perform his side of the contract. His side of the contract meaning delivering goods or providing services, whatever. But he is ready to perform his side of the contract with no guarantee of receiving a payment. With no guarantee of receiving a payment. Instead, any payment received is based on the benefits that emerge to the customer because of the supplier work. So because of that supplier's work, whatever benefit I get, that benefit will be shared with the supplier. This is the arrangement. So look, it is good for the customer because he does not have to pay anything fixed. If I benefit because of the supplier, then only I have to pay him. Chalo, another more realistic example I'll give you. Say I'm doing my production my way. There was one company, one management consultant company who came to me and suggested to me that you make so many changes in your production, then you will have benefit. They just gave me suggestion. I told them that what will you charge for the suggestion? They said no, free of cost I am giving you suggestion, free advice we are giving you. If you benefit from my advice, then you share the benefits with me. Well, that is the gain sharing arrangement. Now I followed his advice. According to his advice, I could get more production, more sales, more profit. Now because of his advice, as much extra profit I got, I will share that extra profit with that guy. This is called as gain sharing arrangements. Yes, so naturally this is pretty much risky for that supplier. So look, these are the keywords. Your answer should contain the words that supplier has no guarantee of receiving any payment. He will do his work, he will do his part of the work without any guarantee of payment. Yes, he will do his part of the work without any guarantee of payment. So that is definitely risky for the supplier, because either he could spend a fortune of efforts, he will spend a fortune of money, and he might not get anything in return, walk away with nothing. Or alternatively, if benefits to the customer are substantial, then supplier could find itself rewarded with a very large return. Done? Yes. Now when I say gain is shared, what is that gain? What exactly will be that gain? Gain is mostly in the form of cost savings. Because of that supplier's advice, I saved some cost. Whatever cost I saved, that cost saving I will share with the supplier. So gain can be in the form of cost savings from reducing the cost of supplies, or it can be by implementing some new skills and technologies. He gave me some new technology, new trainings and all, due to which my cost was saved. Or because of the supplier I have a faster delivery time, or because of that supplier there was improvement in operations. Whatever, all these are examples of gain. The gain is not necessarily financial, although financial gains are expected to occur frequently, because if gains are not financial, then supplier will not earn anything out of it. He will earn a share only if the gains are financial. But not necessary that there will be only financial gains, there will also be non-financial gains that ultimately will benefit the customer. With emphasis on greater openness, gain sharing deals are a win-win situation. Another keyword, it is a win-win situation for supplier and their customers. These keywords should come in your answer. Then trust me, your answer for gain sharing arrangements will be perfectly drafted. Done. And the last one is about outsourcing. Outsourcing is nothing but make or buy decision. It means to reduce cost. In order to reduce cost or improve efficiency by shifting tasks, operations, jobs or processes to another party for a span of time. So I can reduce my cost by shifting my production to the outsider. I give my production as job work to someone outside. Instead of manufacturing my material myself, I will tell a supplier to manufacture materials for me. Yes. Plus this job work might be done at my premises itself, or that job work might be done at the supplier's, his premises. It can be for products or even for services, even for part of a product. All that will be called as outsourcing. So remember, outsourcing was just like make or buy. Done? Yes. Anyways, that was our chapter number 2. That is end of chapter 2. That's all from me. Thank you very much. We'll come back with chapter number 3 next time. Yeah. Bye bye.